I've got one very important, very pressing question after observing the global climate strike rallies that took place in cities all across Canada. And by observing, I don't just mean watching the different ones on television, on social media, watching the ones in Ottawa, the one in Montreal where Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was at. I mean observing firsthand in person the one that happened in downtown Toronto, in Queen's Park, and spilling over into the adjacent streets. I went down to take a look at what was going on. And, well, it really did spill over into many streets. This thing was massive. I haven't seen a public protest like this in Toronto in many, many years. And my question is about the tone of what they're saying, of what's happening, the frenzied energy, the manic energy that is taking place at these rallies, the claims that are being made with a lot of emotional fervor. We saw Greta Thunberg a couple days ago at the United Nations thundering that people are dying. She said at the rallies on Friday, she was at the one in Montreal, and she condemned Justin Trudeau for not doing enough, even though this is one of the main issues he talks about the most. It seems like there's very little that he and Catherine McKenna do that isn't related to this file. People are dying, she said. I'm not so sure. Send me emails, write to me if I'm mistaken, but I don't know if there's a single example of an individual dying because of climate change that one can isolate as climate change being the cause. We hear about there being extreme weather events, but even the very documents that a lot of climate alarmists cite, these intergovernmental panels on climate change, their reports and so forth, they even say, well, there's no slam dunk correlation proving that, for instance, this extreme weather event was in fact caused by climate change. So what is she actually talking about? But very few people chose to raise their hand and say, hold on, I have a problem with what Greta Thunberg is saying. I have a concern. In fact, some people were publicly chastised, lambasted, even some people let go from their commentator positions for saying critical things about her. I think perhaps they were more personal attacks on her, but you get the point. The idea was don't say much critical about what this young woman is saying. And now many young people are being encouraged to say this themselves. Some of them perhaps through self-motivation, they decide I want to do this as well. Others because their school boards, and I've seen the permission slips, so this is definitely happening, their school boards sent home permission slips to take these kids to these protests, to take them down in buses or to take them via public transit and so forth, so they can be at these rallies where they say the world is on fire. I saw those signs saying that, where they said, down with capitalism. I saw those signs as well. That could maybe suggest to you that there's a bit of a political ideology involved in these events as well, where they say that people are dying, even though that is a rather dodgy sentence there. And when you're focused on those extremes, can you bring yourself back and just talk more reasonably about, well, how can we deal with environmental issues, being responsible stewards of the land and so forth? Talking about these things in moderate ways that bring everyone together and work towards solutions. What were the proposed solutions? I didn't hear much. I heard a lot of people yelling very dire, urgent things. But when you're so caught up in this mania, how do you step back? And how do you then talk about public policy issues? How do you talk about these incredibly dense reports put out by various organizations, United Nations groups, other scientists and stuff? How do you go from the world is burning to then sitting down and really putting on your reading glasses if you need them and flipping through and wading through these reports that take many, many hours to get through and try and understand? You know, it's interesting. I was reading the new introduction and conclusion to Naomi Klein's latest book, and she is one of the most passionate climate alarmists out there, Canadian activist who is working behind the scenes with people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And I had to chuckle because she knows a lot of things. She sort of knows what she's talking about. I don't agree with her on a lot of conclusions, but in this essay, she actually gives us a few keys to other things we can do that are not massive carbon taxes and not a socialist takeover of all governments to bring about a Green New Deal, which is, of course, what she wants. But she acknowledges in the essay, as more people should acknowledge, that planting trees is actually a great way to do carbon capture. Why don't we talk about planting trees more? She acknowledges that a lot of these new green energy initiatives that private companies are doing of their own volition and through their own hard work and ingenuity and just the human capacity to be innovative, they are actually creating a better mousetrap, a new green mousetrap. And as the years go by, they're creating more and more affordable models, meaning the free marketplace of ideas is actually working, meaning a lot of these doomsday scenarios are perhaps not going to come about because of just human beings independently doing things, some of it even driven by capitalism, the desire to build an electric vehicle that is going to be cheaper than an internal combustion engine. Wow, these are actually really impressive things that we should be talking about. But we're not talking about them because we're too caught up in this frenzy that we've seen at these climate rallies.